All right, so this is the meeting of the CSI implementation group for Kubernetes. Today on the agenda, I had, so big thanks to Jan for shepherding the design doc and the API changes while I was out. I had a couple of questions for him about some of the changes that were made, nothing huge. I've updated the design doc with the remaining changes, and I'm poking to take a look at that today and try to get that approved and merged as soon as possible so we can continue to iterate on top of that once it's merged. Looks like Jan is not able to join us today, but he answered the questions in the agenda doc, and I'm going to be taking a look at those offline, so we don't need to discuss those in the meeting unless folks here are interested in any particular question. So we'll just jump to the next agenda item, Vlad's CSI questions. His first question was about error network status.
I'm sorry, it's a rework status. I think we kind of discussed it, but
yeah, I could quickly
summarize
that.
Yep.
So the way that the spec is currently spec'd out, error codes are at the application layer. There are first-class error code messages, and then every response contains either one of the actual response or the error. This is kind of heavyweight and really hard to develop against. And so the change that I am working on is modifying the CSI spec to use gRPC error codes. As part of that change, we're going to flatten the response and clean up the response so that the response no longer contains the error message. And it's just going to contain the contents of the result as the top level. So hopefully that'll make life easier.
Absolutely. Just for me.
Yep.
Keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. It's a pain when you're mocking this stuff.
Yeah.
So it's definitely gonna make it easier.
Cool.
Yep.
Next on the agenda.
Just wait 1 second. The first one was not talked about. List volumes.
Oh yes, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So I created an issue. I think it was last week, and there's been some discussions on it. So the issue is that list volumes assumes there's going to be only one client. So if there's only one client, when there's a request, and then the request says I can only get a maximum of 10, for example, and there's 1,000.
Interesting.
Then the response says, here's a token so you can come back, right? And that makes sense. But it's not possible to do that in the RPC model when there's multiple clients. So now there's two clients, one at time 1 and time 2. Mm-hmm. And only at time 2, there's a new volume. But so now there's two lists. So where's the token going to go to? So there needs to be some type of
Can the token itself contain the information required to identify the client? Or do you explicitly need a client identifier?
No, I don't even need a client identifier. I just need an ID and a cursor. Really.
So can that be encoded into the token?
You could do that, but then you're really creating your own RPC on a string. You see what I mean? And you're overloading the token to become something that everybody's going to need. Everybody's going to need multiple client support, right? So if it was just like my driver doing this, then I completely agree with you. I would overload it and it'll be done. But the issue is that my concern is
other SPs are going to run into the same issue.
Yeah.
But so I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here and argue if for a field to be encoded in the API, it needs to be relevant to either ideally both the SP and the CO.
Yeah.
And in this case, if we introduce a client ID, would it just be like a pass-through from the SP back to the SP? Or would the CO interpret it at all?
You could do it that way. There's many ways, there's methods to actually implement this. You could have the CO say, this is me, and give me my token, right? And then you return, and you could do that. That way the driver can track the call it the client ID and the token.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could say if the client says I want max, because if you don't put any max value, this all works, right?
Mm-hmm.
You could have 1,000 clients and it all works.
Sure.
But it's when you say max value,
Yeah.
it's when the driver could return some UID,
Yeah.
some unique ID and a cursor, and that would work. All I need back, all I'm trying to say in that request, in that issue is, let's just add some unique identifier to the response, and then that will solve all issues.
A unique identifier to the response of the first call.
Yeah.
Then like that unique identifier is then passed in on subsequent calls
for that token for the.
So that's where I'm trying to see what is the benefit of having that unique identifier be a separate field rather than stuck in as part of the token.
Good question, and I think I'm going back to what I said at the beginning is by making it specific or making it explicit, the CSI driver developers understand there's a contract between them and the caller saying that I must return this so that I know when you come back who you are, so I can continue your cursor. You see what I mean? If not, there's no.
So it sounds like the argument is that by having it as a first-class field, it is much more likely that someone implementing a storage plugin is going to notice that this is a requirement and code it accordingly, versus if you just assume that it's going to be part of the token, that they're probably going to miss this and not handle multiple clients correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, I think it's a good argument. I don't know how much I buy it because I'd like to keep the interface as minimal as possible. I would prefer maybe just adding comments on the token to call this out explicitly. So somebody who is going to be implementing this reads what the token is, and it should say the token should handle both, the pagination as well as identifying the client.
Okay, so if we do that, let me see. I just want to continue from that model. If we do that, then I'm going to need everything that gRPC is on marshalling for me. I'm going to have to marshal something into a string and then unmarshal from a string.
Yes.
So I'm creating my own RPC inside it, my own encoding.
You're creating your own serialization, deserialization format.
That's what I'm saying. And I understand that it is definitely possible to do that. I'm not disagreeing with that. But now we're introducing that the driver should unmarshal and unmarshal to handle multiple clients, which is going to happen to everyone.
That's fine. The reason I'm okay with that is because both the generator and the consumer of this content is the storage plugin itself, not the CO. As far as the CO is concerned, this is opaque information, right?
Okay, so if we can, yes, you're right. But in a way, what we're trying to say is that I have received something from the driver to uniquely identify where I should continue. Okay.
Yep.
So what I'm saying is that there's not enough information for me to do that unless I marshal stuff in there.
And I agree. I mean that's I think that's okay. That's basically saying that the token, as if it's implemented naively, will be incomplete, and that the token must contain enough information both for pagination and for identification. The content, I don't think the argument for splitting out the identifier as a separate field is strong enough because the CO doesn't care about that information. It doesn't care. All it knows is that if you split it out into two fields, now instead of passing in one field, I need to keep track of both and pass both in. Right. I'm not going to parse those as a CO. I'm not going to look at the contents of it. The fact that there are two different fields that I'm going to receive and then pass back in, it's just more overhead. Yes,
but everybody has going to have to do this.
Everybody has to do this, but it's going to be the storage plugin defines what that is, and it has to generate it and then read it back. So it's not really a huge concern because it's the same reader and writer. the things that should go into the interface are the things where there is information that the CO that must be communicated to the CO, and the CO needs to be able to do something with that. And in this case, both those pieces of information are really, as far as the CO is concerned, it's just some way to be able to say, please give me the next set of information.
Okay.
Cool.
So I have a quick question. So the whole notion of paginating the result is it based on anecdotal knowledge that we know we're going to have so much information that we're going to need to paginate it, or is it just a nice to have?
So two things. One is whenever you have some sort of list call on a unbounded set, you should have pagination. In this case, imagine there could be possibly thousands of volumes that exist in a system.
Okay.
And having them all returned in one gRPC call is probably a bad idea. Second call is, sorry, go ahead.
No, what I was going to add, so from what you just described, we should have pagination in the call itself. So that should be built in.
It already is.
Oh, it already is. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. The second thing is, I don't think we as Kubernetes is actually using list volumes, are we?
No, not that I can think of.
Yeah, I think this call was mostly for Mesos. We're going to use it for rectification, and so we aren't using this call, but let's keep it clean anyway. Okay.
I'll add the conclusion to the notes into the issue.
Cool. Thank you very much. Next up is Jan's status this evening. We can save. Oh, you guys are just putting the statuses in there. Okay. Vlad, do you want to just give your status verbally, and then I can do that, and you can do
sure. That. So as I pointed out in the document. So as you suggested the last time we talked, I split the PRs into two. One is just basically the implementation of the CSI volume, persistent volume source.
Okay.
And the second PR is basically the actual plugin implementation. So for the first one, if we can get that merged as soon as possible, that'd be great because it'll make the second one way smaller.
Awesome. So the first one is basically just API, volume source API.
Just the volumes. The first one is the volume source API plus everything that goes around it.
Okay.
Like the describe and types and all that good stuff.
Okay.
And then the second one is where I'm going to keep track of what I'm doing in the actual business PKG volume / CSI.
Okay.
So that's how I ended up splitting it.
That makes sense to me. What I'm going to do is I'll take a look at the volume type one, persistent type, and I'm going to wait until the design doc itself is merged, and as soon as that's merged, go ahead and LGTM it, so that way there's no fluctuation.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So as far as actual progress on the mount, so now I'm able to deploy a PVC in a pod that uses that PVC, and I'm able to trigger a node publish on a on a running mock server, and I'm not only that, but doing the identity client as well, get that running and get versions, et cetera, et cetera.
And are you just mocking out the attach part?
Yeah, so I haven't gotten to that point, but that's what I'm doing. So that's what I ended up doing is create a PV with an empty storage class, and create a PVC with the same storage class, and then create a pod that uses that PVC so I can trigger a setup at call on the mounter interface.
And you haven't implemented the attacher interface, so it just gets bypassed for now.
Yes. So when I get to that point, that should be in the next couple of days. I'll have to figure out how to trigger an attach detach without having I guess to trigger the attach detach, I'm gonna need a dynamic provisioning.
Yeah. So attach detach is going to be fun. Ideally, I would love to have attach detach be optional so that it's only run if the driver supports it, but unfortunately that would be a significant amount of work. And so for alpha, what we're going to do is all CSI volume sources will implement attacher.
I see.
And all of them will, on the attach call, create the new volume attachment object. And then they're going to pull the volume attachment object and then react accordingly. So what you can do, in fact, is go ahead and basically submit your volume plugin as is without the attacher, wait for the volume attachment API to get checked in, and then implement the attacher on top of that.
Okay. Yeah, I'll wait because I'm still putting in a bunch of testing code in there, which will be crucial for to get this stuff.
Okay.
Make sure everything is working.
What you want to keep in mind is when you put in the attacher, it's going to block on the attachment. But I guess you could deal with
on the volume attachment.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing when I do the attachment, the only thing I'm going to do is get a core client and put that object in there and on the API, send it to the API server. And then there'll be other details.
Yeah. The problem is that your logic is going to pull that object and wait for it to be modified. So I guess whenever you introduce it, then you're going to have to modify your test to say, okay, when I see this object get created, go ahead and change the field to attached. And then your code is going to be like, oh, it's attached. Okay, I'm going to continue.
Well, am I changing it to attach, or is it's going to be updated by the external?
Technically, it would be the external attacher. But if you want to write an end-to-end test, assuming there's an attacher running, you could just create your own little hook inside your end-to-end test after the that basically monitors for this object and then manipulates it and acts like the external attacher.
Yeah, that is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, so far it's been good. Yeah, it's been good. But I was just excited just to get to that point where I can deploy a pod and it triggers the whole thing.
And I like that down into smaller pieces. Let's keep getting them all checked in, and then.
Yeah. Yep, that's it.
Okay. So for my status, I talked about it a little bit earlier. I am finishing up the volume attachment API. There wasn't much that needed to be done there. There were some unit tests that were breaking. I just pushed a new change for that. That hopefully fixes it. And then I was updating the design doc with all the latest feedback addressed. I'm hoping Tim to get those reviewed and hopefully merged as soon as possible. And then my next task is working on CSI error codes because that is blocking a lot of people, and I want to get that unblocked as soon as possible. Luis?
Yeah.
Do you want to give a status update real quick? Or?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I've been working on the CSI driver, you've probably been noticing, for Portworx, and that's where I go through each one of the APIs and finally all these things. So right now I'm in the create and delete volume. So once I do those, I'll be very close to actually having a workable driver.
Nice.
With Portworx. Second thing is I just wanted to update you on our continuing discussion is that I looked at the comments from the issue for list volumes.
Okay.
And what they call it is a bearer token.
Okay.
So bearer token from a point of view of OAuth, JWT, JSON Web Tokens, and bearer token has a marshaled in JSON stuff. Okay.
Okay.
And that is then placed in an HTTP header. I don't know if you used JSON Web Token.
No, I haven't played with.
So what that means is that even though it is a string,
Uh-huh.
A bearer token is understood to have
A certain.
martial data in it.
Right.
So what the thing is that if you read the spec, it doesn't say that anywhere, but it looks like the people who wrote that, that's what they meant, right?
Okay.
So what I've asked at the end is that makes sense now, and then we'll put a change in to say, look, this is a bearer token, and you as the CSI driver are responsible to marshaling in data and unmarshaling to get stuff. So I'll actually make that change in there.
Okay.
So the driver, I was going to ask, so the driver author is responsible for stuffing that token in the header and get it back?
Not in the header.
No, not in the header. See, this was called confusing. So a bearer token is normally in the header on the authorization, right?
Right.
So no, it is a bearer token that is like that in that it's martial data, but it is in the response in the RPC.
I see. Okay.
So it's like, yeah. So that's why documentation is very important there.
Okay.
So I'll actually be handling an issue for that.
Cool.
A PR for that, actually.
Awesome.
So that's where I am right now. I'm very close to create and delete. And the next thing, I would like to have as much as I can this week for my driver. And then next week, I should be able to start with the whatever it means to do to E2E test for this. Because I want to, at that stage, I think we'll have more and more information of each one of us, and then we'll be able to collect it and see what we do. So that's my plan for next week.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
All right. With that, I think we're at the end of the meeting. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about?
Quick question. So do you have not a drop dead date, but like a good date to shoot for, to have that, to put the stuff, check it in and make sure that it's working?
So we call
it alpha.
When we first started, we were talking about this Friday, the 10th, as kind of the date where all the independent components should be ready. Realistically, that's looking unlikely. Next Friday, the 17th, I think might be more reasonable. But Fridays are always weird because when you aim for Friday, whatever deadline you set, you're going to miss it. So let's say Thursday the 16th. That way we can slip into Friday.
Yeah.
And then the 22nd, the following Wednesday, is code freeze.
Got it.
So that will give us the weekend and a couple of days of buffer.
Yeah.
And then also at some point, I want to kind of get a good idea of what alpha looks like. Both from CSI itself, what exactly 0.10 will look like, and kind of what we're shooting for. Because I know all of we have a lot of moving parts. Some of them are more critical than others, so I want to make sure that I understand what exactly we're shooting for. So we don't have to do it now.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can probably discuss that Thursday, November 16th, or Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I just want to kind of talk about that. You guys talked about that 2 days ago. I saw that from the YouTube videos. Thank you for recording it. And I saw you had like P0s, P1 in the document. I think we may have to be like completely realistic by Monday.
Yeah, we'd probably need to go in and revise some of the P0s and see how P0s really are.
We need to say like this and not this. We only had like 4 days after that.
But the other important thing is that the core Kubernetes changes are the ones that have the immediate, really short deadline, which is the 22nd. The external changes, we have a little bit more time to play with.
Okay.
It's like what, like 2 more weeks, 3?
Ideally, it's until the release of the actual 1.9, which would be a month after. So it would be end of this, or like middle of December, because end of December is the holidays. So yeah, realistically, like a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. Okay, cool. Excellent.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right. See you. You too.